Good afternoon. Hey, I'm Nathan Thomas. I'm the General Manager of Amazon WorkSpaces. Thanks for coming today. I'm very happy to be joined on stage today by Jeff Mendelson, who's the Director of End User Computing at Johnson & Johnson. We're going to be talking a little bit today about deploying Amazon WorkSpaces at scale. So I'm going to start by explaining a little bit of background about why we built Amazon WorkSpaces, explain some of the key enterprise features, and talk through some of the security approach for how we keep our customers secure using Amazon WorkSpaces. And then Jeff is going to provide some insights on how Johnson & Johnson is using those features to scale Amazon WorkSpaces in their end user computing environment. At the end of the session, we'll have plenty of time for questions. All right, let's start with some background on Amazon WorkSpace. An Amazon WorkSpace is very simply a desktop that you stream from the cloud. So for end users, it feels very much like the same type of Windows experience that they have running on a local laptop or local desktop. You can connect to it from a lot of different device types and from different locations so that your applications and data are always available to you. Today, when you think about providing end-user computing to your internal customers from an IT perspective, you're probably thinking about providing them with a laptop or desktop or PC that's a managed device and providing that along with access to a corporate network, which is a trusted network that has access to your corporate data. At Amazon WorkSpaces, we have a very different vision for the future of end-user computing. We believe there's a way that you can provide solutions for your end users which are going to give them more flexibility and more choice in the way that they compute, that provides them a greater level of security and protects your corporate data more effectively, and which is a lot simpler for you to administer, all while providing a lower total cost of ownership for your end-user computing environments. In short, we believe that in the future, you're going to be providing a cloud desktop to your end users. We believe that a larger percentage of those end users are going to bring their own devices. So they're going to be bringing devices from home to connect with that they own. We believe that you're going to shift the way that you think about your network and your corporate network and have less trust in your network and assume that the ports and the wireless access points that make up your corporate network are as untrusted as a Wi-Fi in a coffee shop. And so we also believe that looking backwards, we're going to find that some of the security decisions we've made in the past with end-user computing are going to look a little strange. So today, end users are putting data on devices and walking out the front door of your building with that data every day. Today, end users are mingling their own personal applications, their personal lives, their personal security decisions into a device that you're providing for them, and then they're connecting that to your trusted computing network and have access to your corporate data. I think in retrospect, CSIOs are going to find that to be a very strange model looking backwards. The good news is for Amazon WorkSpaces customers, we're actually able to execute on a lot of this vision today. And so obviously Jeff's going to talk about how J&J is doing that. We've got thousands of other customers who are also doing the same thing today. So let's start by talking a little bit about some of the customer challenges we were trying to solve with Amazon WorkSpaces. So our customers are very frequently folks who've already looked at VDI. They appreciate the management value that VDI brings. They want to provide that type of solution, but they've found that trying to fulfill that dream is pretty challenging. So actually executing on building a global infrastructure to support end users at scale is a pretty big problem for them. We're also hearing from customers that they're seeing this increase in the popularity of bring your own device models, so a proliferation of different devices, maybe unmanaged devices from an end user perspective, and that's causing them challenges. We're also hearing about our growing diversity of workforce. So that is, there's a lot more users who are working from remote locations, remote offices, and there might be more seasonality to those workers, so lots of consultants, a variable workforce. And so for those types of users, a traditional desktop model where you issue a laptop, issue a PC, build out a corporate network to every location may not be the ideal solution. We're also seeing a lot of tablet adoption, and so there's a lot of confusion from customers on how best do I provide my Windows applications to tablet users, and they need some sort of solution that gets there today, not in the future. And then of course, all of these are areas where it becomes more challenging to keep the desktop environment secure. So you've got a lot more diversity in the environment, you've got a lot of challenges in that front. So to address those challenges, we've taken VDI into the cloud with Amazon WorkSpaces. So when we launched Amazon WorkSpaces, one of the most surprising things for us was how many of our customers told us the experience of using their Amazon Workspace was much better than the experience of using their on-premises VDI solutions, even when they'd spent a large amount of time trying to optimize those solutions for user experience. What they found was that once they decided to deploy VDI, the challenge of building out a global infrastructure for an effective user experience is actually a very real challenge. So you've got to buy and build servers, you've got to tune the workloads of those servers for the specifics of those desktop environments you expect to support. You've got to build out a disk infrastructure with NAS and SAN that's at a low level of latency and high throughput. You've got to provide a networking environment in your data centers to handle the streaming. And so those get to be really big challenges for a single data center. And then if you think about having a global workforce that needs that in multiple regions, it becomes significantly more complicated. So with Amazon Workspaces, we are able to leverage and take advantage of the huge global infrastructure that AWS has already built to solve a lot of these problems. Amazon Workspaces is built on top of technologies like EC2, EBS, VPC, Direct Connect, and those technologies already have a lot of the core characteristics you really want to see in a broad, effective global VDI infrastructure. And so as a customer, you get to take advantage of that scale and that performance, whether you're launching one workspace or 10,000 workspaces, and whether you're connecting from one office or if you're connecting from around the globe. So if you're a Workspaces customer, you simply start by launching however many workspaces you need to launch from our console or from the APIs. We handle all of the heavy lifting associated with standing up that infrastructure. So we provision the workspace, and we make sure that it has the correct networking as you've defined it to be. We make sure that it has the right disk, and that disk is always going to be available. And your end users simply get an email pointing them to their new workspace. They download the clients, they install and connect to their workspace. You can start this with as little as one workspace and then scale as your business scales. So Amazon Workspaces is very simply a Windows 2008 R2 server providing a Windows 7 client desktop experience. So from an administration perspective, all of the existing tools that you use today to administer your existing desktops are going to work just fine on top of Amazon Workspaces. So tools like SECM are going to work fine for deployments and for management on top of that existing environment, as well as then extending into Amazon Workspaces. At the same time, Amazon Workspaces can be integrated with your on-premises Active Directory solutions. So whatever your existing corporate directory infrastructure looks like, your workspaces can be part of that. So when you launch a new workspace, it gets domain joined directly into your existing environment. That means your users get to log in using their existing username and password for Windows. It means they have access to all of the corporate assets that you've already built out for desktop users, whether that's Exchange or SharePoint or share drives. All of those are going to be available. It also means that tools like Group Policy that you use to administer and config your Windows desktops and environments are going to work fine for workspaces. As we've talked to customers, we've found that every one of them has a slightly different approach to defining what types of applications, what types of data, and what types of configuration they want to have in the workspaces that they're running. And so to help customers with that sort of mass customization process, we have a feature called custom images or custom bundles. Custom bundles simply let you modify the golden image that's used to launch the workspaces for your end users. So from an administrator's perspective, you're very simply taking a workspace, launching it, configuring the applications that you want, configuring the data that you want in it, and then setting up any config. And validating that you're happy with that, snapshotting it, and then using that as the basis for new workspaces launches. And then if you want to create more custom bundles and have them for different groups, you can do that. So you have lots of different options for custom bundles for your end users. So let's take a little bit of a deep dive on how we keep your data secure and available and have a secure access approach to getting to your workspace. When a user connects to an Amazon workspace, that authentication process is completed over an SSL encrypted channel. Then once we start the streaming, all of the streaming data is encrypted using AES 256 encryption. So all that's coming out from the workspace and going to the client is an encrypted pixel stream of the video output. There's no data that ever lives on a client device. What that means is if a client device is ever lost, none of your data is ever lost with that client device. There's also no way to get the data from the stream as it's happening because it's encrypted. It's also important to recognize that our users control the network access for each workspace. Each workspace shows up as a managed endpoint in your VPC, which means that all of the existing tools, like security groups that you use to manage those endpoints, apply to workspaces. So you decide whether the workspace is going to have network access to your corporate data or internet, and it's up to you how you'd like that to be applied. In addition to keeping your corporate data secure and making sure that the workspaces are secure, we also want to make sure you always have access to the data that you've got in the cloud associated with your workspace. So the data store for each workspace is EBS. So each workspace has an EBS volume. That means it's got high performance and low latency characteristics and high availability characteristics. We also then take that EBS volume and snapshot it every 12 hours. So you get a snapshot to S3, which means if you ever need some sort of recovery or backup, we do have that data as well. For customers looking for a little bit more security in the authentication process, we also support multi-factor authentication. So that means you can use your existing one-time password mechanisms to connect and authenticate to your workspaces. So if you've got a Radius infrastructure, we'll support passing through the one-time passwords directly to that infrastructure. For many Workspaces users, we find that this effectively replaces the VPN that they've been using in the past. So that is, they'll take an end-user device, install the Workspaces client on it, and then when they authenticate, use their username and password, typically their Windows username and password from AD, pass in a one-time password. Then we're doing SSL encrypted communication to auth, and then doing the AES 256 encrypted streaming, which means that they don't effectively need a VPN client anymore. All right, so let's pull all this together a little bit. So this is an example architecture diagram that gives you an idea of how a particular customer environment might look and the way that they would use it to connect and run a workspace. On the left-hand side of this drawing, what you'll see is the customer-owned assets. So that's your corporate network, your corporate data. On the right-hand side, you'll see the assets running inside of AWS. And so you'll see on the upper of the right-hand side the AWS managed components, and on the lower of the right-hand side the components that live in your VPC that you manage. So let's walk through an example of an end user logging in to their workspace. So in the upper left there you'll see a little pink box that says users. That represents a user trying to connect to their workspace. That user is depicted as being either inside or outside of the corporate firewall. So they could be connecting from a wireless access point at a coffee shop, or they could be connecting from inside the corporate firewall in your environment. They're going to initiate communication to the AWS managed auth session gateways, which is the red box up above in the right-hand section. And they're going to be, again, using an SSL encrypted channel for that auth. They're going to pass in a username and password. And if it's enabled, they're going to be passing in an MFA one-time password. That auth gateway is then going to communicate to the Active Directory connector that's running inside of your VPC, which is then reaching out to your Active Directory on-premises implementation for the password authentication. It's also going to be passing through the one-time password, which will reach out to your Radius implementation and validating that that one-time password is valid. Once authentication is complete and accepted, then that token-based authentication is going to be passed back to the blue box, which is the streaming gateway, and we're going to start a session stream from the workspace that's running in your VPC. So we're going to wind up with a encrypted streaming session going back down to that client. This particular example, of course, is just representative of one use case. There are a lot of options and permutations here. So if you've got specifics, there are other ways that this can be configured and run. So after launching WorkSpaces, we heard from our customers several times that they really wanted to see more visibility into their workspaces and have more control over their workspaces. They effectively wanted to really innovate themselves on top of what we had built. As with a lot of other AWS services, you'll find that the roadmap for Amazon Workspaces is 90–95% driven by these types of customer requests. And so in this case, we really wanted to provide something that allowed our customers to build and innovate and meet those needs. So we launched 2 new features not too long ago. One is APIs for workspaces, and one is CloudWatch integration for monitoring for workspaces. So APIs let you have a programmatic access to managing your workspaces, whether you're launching, whether you're shutting down, whether you're getting descriptions of your existing resources. All of that can be done in a programmatic way. And we're going to hear from Jeff in just a few minutes about how Johnson & Johnson has used those APIs to build a set of tools for them to manage their workload, their workforce via the WorkSpaces APIs today. CloudWatch metrics use the existing CloudWatch infrastructure to let you gain visibility into the health and status of your workspaces and see information about user connections, user connection patterns, and see utilization rates for those workspaces. Again, these guys are using that stuff as well in production now. So WorkSpaces customers have also told us that they really want to use a broad range of different devices to connect to their workspaces. So that ranges from corporate managed devices like a desktop or a laptop in a corporate environment to totally unmanaged devices that are end user owned. So we've really committed to supporting an ever-growing range of these types of devices. Today we support Macs and PCs running on desktop and laptop form factors. We support tablets running iOS and Android, and we support Zero clients, which are kind of a thin client style device available from a lot of different vendors in the marketplace today for customers who are looking for a lower cost, lower management overhead solution to connect to their workspaces. When we talk about providing support for a device, we really mean we're going to commit to having a very high quality user experience for that device. And a good example is what we do with tablets. When you use a tablet to connect to workspaces, you've got a unique touch-based configuration menu that you can use to configure that device. You also have support for multi-touch gestures on that device. And then for devices that support keyboards and mice, we support those fully for connecting and working on your workspace as well. What that means is tablets become an effective PC replacement or a mechanism to connect and use Windows applications in your corporate environment today. Finally, since launching, we've heard a lot from customers that while they love the custom bundle approach, they would also like a more fine-grained mechanism for packaging, deploying, updating, and managing applications inside of their workspaces. So recently we launched the WorkSpaces Application Manager, or WAM. So WAM lets you package, deploy, and update applications to your workspaces. WAM gives you full control over which applications are entitled to which users inside of your environment. And because WAM integrates with your AD infrastructure just the way that WorkSpaces does, it means that you can simply use your existing AD group infrastructure to define which users have access to which applications. While WAM can package your own line of business applications and applications that you've built and applications that you've got licensed to, it's also got the capability to consume applications from the AWS Marketplace for desktop apps. This is a marketplace where you can procure applications that can be deployed to your workspaces. And the real innovation here is that those applications are licensed on a monthly basis. So that means that you're now procuring not by buying a multi-year contract from all the individual vendors, but simply going and getting the apps as you need them and only using them for the time range that you need them in. Well, hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into why we built WorkSpaces, a little bit more background on some of the key features and technologies and some of the security infrastructure we tried to build to make it more secure for your corporate data and for connecting to the workspaces. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to provide more on how J&J is building out their solution. And I'll be here with Jeff for questions in a few minutes.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Give us an opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing. So for our virtual desktop journey, it began a few years ago. So we've been looking at this for a number of years. And over that time, we've looked at everything from building our own, building and buying our own service to managed service, and ultimately WorkSpaces. And over the course of that time, our use cases, our primary focus has also evolved. So initially, we started looking very heavily at the mobility use case. So that was the primary focus when we look back a few years. And during the course of that time, we realized, as we were looking at the mobility use case, that there were some interesting opportunities for mobile users, as I think you heard Nathan mention, in terms of the form factors. But generally speaking, we honed in on a much bigger use case. We honed in on a much bigger business opportunity, which we'll talk about in a little while. So we spent a lot of time planning. Over the course of that, few years, we've done a lot of iterations on our business case. We've restated our business case, and I think at this point, we've got a pretty good journey forward, which we'll share with you today. We also did, over the course of that time, extensive testing and validation of the technology. So we've ran pilots probably for a good year and a half with hundreds of users around the world in our environment across pretty much every use case we've been looking at. So that has been an integral part of what got us where we are. And then today we'll talk a bit about how we've implemented WorkSpaces and what we're going to be doing this year and what we're going to be doing next year. So, am I on the right slide? No. So essentially, when I look at our 2015 focus, we've identified really two key areas that we're pursuing. BYOD, where we've got employee demand for a device of choice, but we recognize from a business value proposition that BYOD was very well aligned with what we wanted to achieve in our contractor environment. And we've got a significant number of contractors. So when we look at the opportunity BYOD brought in our contractor world, we saw not just the agility benefits, where we face today sometimes weeks in time lost provisioning users, getting PCs. We've got an extensive contractor community globally, a lot of them offshore. So essentially, we saw a significant opportunity in the agility, but we also recognized a significant financial opportunity. So getting out of the business of providing our partners J&J assets did have a significant upside financially. So that was a big part of our 2015 value proposition, and that's what we're primarily pursuing right now. And as we were going through that, kind of initial testing and journey, we also recognized we still have a significant number of desktop computers in our environment. We tend to be a pretty laptop-heavy environment, so most of our users have laptops, but we're a pretty big environment, so we're still talking about tens of thousands of desktops in the environment. So we recognized, as we ran the numbers, that the benefits of a zero client as a replacement to a desktop were also significant. So the second use case we're primarily pursuing this year and forward will be replacing those desktops as they become end of life with zero clients and WorkSpaces. There's a third use case which I don't have on the slide here that we're also pursuing, which is kind of mergers and acquisitions and divestitures opportunity, where with WorkSpaces, with a virtual desktop, it's a much easier day one integration, and it's a much cleaner separation during a divestiture. So we are leveraging WorkSpaces in that mergers and acquisitions opportunity as well. So as we look forward, that was really our 2015 focus, but as we look forward, we also see significant opportunity in an office-bound worker use case. So we've got a significant number of our employees that just work at home and work at the office. So they're kind of extended day workers, but they don't really travel. So they have a laptop today, so they can kind of go between their office and home and stay productive. And there's an opportunity there we see to potentially, kind of enable them with a workspace to work in both places and a zero client. And also, in a way, give them the benefit of not having to lug around a laptop. So we see an opportunity there that we'll probably scope for next year. There's also a significant upside for us as we retrofit facilities. And in our environment, we're pursuing, in some of our more modern facilities, a way of providing a more shared workspace, flexible workspace environment where users can potentially just come in and sit anywhere, so it's not assigned office space. And in those scenarios, it would be very interesting to enable them with zero clients as well. And workspaces, the flexibility there is very interesting. So as we look at facilities retrofits, that's become a big scenario. And then with our contractors, we tend not to give assigned seating anyway. And if they come to a building, we're already doing hoteling. And so it lends itself very well to putting zero clients in those environments so that contractors can kind of just reserve a space or sit down and get to work. And I think as you heard Nathan highlight some of the interesting, as you look forward, security perspectives when we look back to today, there probably will be a time, not in the distant future for us, where some of our smaller sites, where our wireless network becomes the kind of tiered network environment that we provide different levels of trust and different level of access to our environments. And there'll likely be a time when some of our smaller sites, for which we have hundreds around the world, no longer have to require a J&J circuit, right, and a J&J WAN integration. So we can make it basically an internet-connected site and virtualize everything to our users at that site, which would, substantially increase our flexibility there as well as our cost profile. So why workspaces? As I mentioned, we've been on this journey for a couple of years, and we've pretty much tested out, all of the technologies available in the market. We've seen pretty much every use case that we've explored in our environment tested in all of those technologies. And really what workspaces gave us were some advantages. So clearly, just coming into the cloud gives us the scalability and the global availability of the service. Not having to make an upfront CapEx, large capital investment based on a very accurate demand forecast, was something we learned in our journey through some mistakes that we wanted to avoid happening again. So not making that upfront capital investment was a big business requirement for us that WorkSpaces clearly delivered. The ability to have capacity on demand. So I mentioned we had some lessons learned in our early part of the journey where our ability to accurately demand forecast our environment for this kind of service was difficult. So having the capacity on demand is probably less critical in the current use case that I'm describing we're going after this year. It was more critical in the mobility use case, but clearly our senior leaders looked at that rigidity in building or buying or defining a managed service as a real blocker to VDI adoption. So, having capacity on demand got us out of having to worry about that demand forecasting. Over the course of our partnership with Amazon, we also recognized a very impressive rate of innovation. So I think you heard Nathan talk a bit about how customers drive their features. We've obviously been at the table with Amazon for quite a while on this, and I can say from a rate of innovation perspective, we go from conversations with Amazon to having those features realized, which has really kind of helped facilitate our journey as far as it's gone. Also, as we looked at the cloud and we looked at workspaces, the instrumentation and controls we get back far exceed what we ever would have had in an on-prem scenario, right? If we had to build our own technology on-prem or even do a managed service, the complexity involved in getting the operational data needed to keep that thing running well, making sure the user experience is solid, was substantial. So really, the instrumentation and just controls we get out of this environment exceed anything we could have ever done ourselves. So that was a clear win for us. And I mentioned, there's a lot of non-financial benefits of workspaces, and I think you heard Nathan highlight all the ones I think we would echo. But cost savings was kind of at the foundation of why we pursued this journey. I mean, without the cost savings, it probably would have been a different discussion. The non-financial benefits are great, and I think from an IT perspective, everyone recognizes them. But when we go to our business units, it's really a financial conversation. So, as a healthcare company, not really focused on technology, having that financial benefit was really important. And we did see some really interesting cost savings opportunities by getting out of the business of providing physical PCs to our contractor community, managing our desktops differently with 0 clients. So financial benefit was really driving a lot of this. And WorkSpaces really enabled us to get out of worrying about, as you heard Nathan say, building and configuring your own VDI service. You're figuring out density and IOPS and users per core, and getting out of all of that was kind of liberating for us, because what we ended up being able to focus on, instead of building the right back end, was building the right service so that the users and our support staff could function. So that was clearly enabling us to focus on the service and not the infrastructure was really what made this happen for us as well. So we'll get a little bit into some of the details on our implementation. So generally speaking, for WorkSpaces, we have VPCs in 3 regions. We have an environment in the US, we have an environment in Singapore, and we have an environment in Ireland serving EMEA. So the good news for us was we had a pretty progressive team already working on Amazon Web Service integration, so we were able to kind of just take advantage of this being another workload that just basically took advantage of the flexible infrastructure initiative that we have going on to move as many workloads as we can into cloud environments. So we definitely took advantage of that. So we have these VPC integrations with our key data centers in those 3 regions. And as Nathan highlighted, the APIs became essential, for us. So when we talk about scaling, taking WorkSpaces to scale, since Amazon made the technology part of it their problem, really for us to scale this became about enabling our support staffs and enabling our end users, right? So we weren't going to get a whole lot new headcount to launch a service like this. So really taking advantage of the APIs to automate as much of this end-to-end was critical. So we did. We've got essentially in our environment our standard J&J image. So really from a physical to virtual perspective, it's the same image. It's the same applications, right? It's the same technology managing it. So for all intents and purposes, operationally, it's been very seamless. We did take advantage of the technology. I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. But essentially, we are leveraging our image, our applications, really no change. SCCM is still part of our ecosystem here. We are definitely across multiple geographies, which was critical. So having that presence in the different regions, and also the flexibility to grow into other areas if the demand surfaced was important. So we are direct connected to Amazon. And as you heard Nathan mention, WorkSpaces is typically your Server 2008 image. We're obviously using our standard J&J Windows 7 image, and we've configured that to be our environment. So having the desktops in the cloud does come with some considerable advantages over having, as I mentioned, a very heavy laptop environment with PCs roaming the world, powering on, powering off, going into hibernation, getting lost, getting stolen. So really having that environment in the cloud and centralized gave us a clear advantage in terms of improving our patch and compliance management processes. And we've taken advantage of that. So even though we are using the same technologies to manage our virtual desktops as we are our physical desktops, there is a clear distinction and significant advantage to having those desktops centralized. So here's a little bit of a couple of screenshots on how we've taken the enable support staff opportunity forward. So essentially, what we've done, we've got a pretty complex environment, and we support users all over the world in many languages. Across many countries. We've got 4 key operation centers where we've got help desk reps. We've got over 400 help desk reps. So enabling support staff to have the right information in front of them when they're troubleshooting an end user call, with the emphasis on making that user happy and closing that issue out as quickly as possible, was important. So essentially we built an ops console that gave the different tiers of our support staff, level 1, level 2, level 3 resources, the right access, no additional privileged access to things that we wouldn't want them to have, but the right access to do the right things, to get the right information, to quickly understand what's going on if there is an issue and resolve it. So we built an ops console. And what you can see up in the right-hand screen there is a little bit of a snapshot of one of our workflows to provision workspaces. So essentially, I'll get into this in the next slide a little bit on the end user side, but essentially automating the process from when an end user makes a request for a workspace to that workspace getting provisioned and fully set up for that user. So really enabling the support staff, when we talk about scaling workspaces at a large complex enterprise like ours, it was essential to really get that support staff fully enabled quickly, and those APIs were essential in doing that. So the other aspect of our implementation was really to enable the end user, right? So with workspaces, with the automation we were able to achieve, we also took the opportunity to try to enable a little bit more of a self-service model than we have historically had. So with the desktop in the cloud and with all the automation and the controls we had, we essentially wanted to take it from the point when a person comes into our service catalog and makes a request or onboards a new user. We wanted to automate the whole process, right? We wanted to automate the process that the user gets notified, that the user gets setup instructions, that the user gets their workspace, and the user gets their applications and has an opportunity, if they're an existing user, to migrate their data. So on the end user side, we did integrate with ServiceNow, which is our ITSM platform, and our service request portal. Using the APIs, we made that process kind of an end-to-end automated process from the point where somebody, whether it's a J&J sponsor bringing on a new contractor or a manager hiring a new employee, they onboard a person, and if they are a person that's going to get a workspace, the whole process is automated. So from that first, as you can see on the top, welcome email through our service request portal to the end user getting instructions on getting themselves set up, we've had some significant success there. So I think generally speaking, as a healthcare company, most of our end users are not really tech savvy, right? We don't have a very tech savvy user environment. So making it easy and not driving help desk calls up was another key objective of the program. So by providing very simple setup instructions and automation behind a lot of it, and even including a wizard for users to migrate their data from their physical PC to their virtual PC, has been a big success, right? So we've had obviously a long test cycle, and we've had most of the beginning of this year to build this stuff. And as we're deploying, this is kind of enabling us to really do this without, again, that increase in support staff or complex training of these help desk reps to get this going. And our end users are, generally speaking, able to run through this process and get themselves set up without having to consult with an IT professional. So that has been, as well, a large part of our success and well received by our end user community. So when we talk about full life cycle, again, as a healthcare company, we've got a very critical security and compliance focus. So in our physical world with physical PCs, we have processes to ensure when a user leaves the company that we follow the right protocols, right? So that we make sure that if ever needed, their data is available. And in the physical world, you can imagine that's quite daunting because we've got a large laptop community. So things got interesting in the cloud, and so we've been able to meet, and or exceed, most of the requirements we had there because this technology giving us the snapshot and archive capability. So what have been some of our learnings? 5 key learnings. So I mentioned early in our journey, we pretty much explored all of the options in the marketplace when it came to VDI, and we even implemented some. We quickly learned, the traditional VDI model was just not going to work for us, right? It was too rigid. It was not aligned with where we were going from a flexible infrastructure perspective, required significant capital investments, and also a very accurate demand forecast. So we quickly realized that traditional VDI was not for us. Also, once we kind of took that leap to WorkSpaces, that we recognized that technology wasn't going to be the hard part, right? Essentially, WorkSpaces made the technology much easier. And so since we were able to rapidly deploy a service, the shift became cultural. The shift became, getting an organization as complex as ours to understand that this is, kind of a new way to do what you used to do. And ultimately, it comes with a lot of benefits. So definitely out of our journey so far, we've definitely seen that technology is not the hard part, especially because of WorkSpaces. Also, getting the business case right for us was critical. So as I mentioned, aside from, all of the security benefits and all of the non-financial benefits and agility benefits, we definitely were looking at a financial opportunity. If we didn't have one, it would have been a different conversation. But getting our business case very solid, was a journey. I mean, again, we evolved it over time. We revisited it a lot. At this point, I think we have a very solid business case. So for us, that was critical to ensure leadership was as supportive as they are today. That was a critical part of it. And end user experience kind of makes or breaks success, right? I mean, if an end user, we can tout WorkSpaces till we're blue in the face. If an end user gets a workspace and it doesn't perform as good or better than their physical PC, they're gonna revolt, right? They're gonna push back. So end user experience was kind of a very important focus for us. And interestingly, I think Nathan highlighted it, and I would echo, we've seen that most times, users kind of, even the apprehensive ones, kind of nervous about going to WorkSpaces. The users we move seem to be delighted, right? So they get a better experience, generally speaking, than they had with their physical PC. There are some compromises, right? But generally speaking, the feedback we've gotten from users we've migrated has been really strong, really positive. So that end user experience, again, was something we really focused on. And the last bullet, clearly, I think, Nathan highlighted some of the shift in putting your desktops in a centralized fashion in the data center or cloud does kind of put a new demand on your network. And we probably needed to focus a little bit more in our Asia Pacific and Latin America regions on how healthy those networks were. When you deploy a service like this, you quickly learn where your network is not healthy. So we did, and we definitely have some remediation to do. But generally speaking, what's been interesting about it, and when I talk about an unhealthy network, I'm talking about the path the user takes to the internet is 100% saturated for the workday, right? I mean, where some of our large offices in other parts of the world, their internet gateways are running at 80+% utilization all day. And we were getting feedback that, after business hours, service works phenomenal. At home, works great. I go to Starbucks, it works great. I can't work in the office. So it became an issue, right? So we are looking at taking some steps in our Asia Pacific and Latin America region to try to remediate that this year. And kind of additional adoption as a result of that. So, that's a little glimpse into what we've been up to. Hopefully it helped answer some of your questions about, what deploying WorkSpaces in a large, complex environment looks like. We'll be around, I think, Nathan, we're going to have some question and answers here, but our core engineering team's here, so if anyone wanted to stick around after and connect, we'd be happy to kind of do that as well.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Jeff. That was great. So it looks like we've got maybe 15 minutes or so for questions. Olivia in the back has a microphone. So if anybody has any questions, it'd be great. It looks like we've got a few over here. Okay. You want to kind of yell it out now, repeat the question.
Office users with desktops, if you're converting to zero clients,
Yes.
what becomes your interface with them? Are you able to avoid capital expenditures on hardware? Do they bring their own device in?
You want to repeat that real quick?
Yeah, so essentially the question is with employees that are being refreshed with a zero client, are we making that bring your own device, or is there a capital investment there? So it's a good question. I mean, I think we've belabored over the zero client, how we're going to do zero clients, because it's really kind of a glorified monitor, right? Our finance department feels strongly that it still should be a capital item, even though it's much less expensive than a PC. So If that's what we're going to do, we're going to do that. But essentially, we are buying them. We're not saying to people, bring your own zero client in any scenario. We're basically providing the zero client, and we're probably still going to amortize it over the same period of time that we would amortize a desktop if we capitalize it. So just much less expensive. And again, it's an appliance. So the benefit we see there, one is we get a lower cost in our site support and setup. And if it breaks, it's basically you kind of get one out of the closet and you replace it, right? So a lot better from a replacement perspective.
Cool. So. All right, got another one down here?
Thank you. Actually, two questions. So one around the e-discovery capabilities, key management. So who holds the keys, and how are you going to manage the access for a third-party type application to then scan across all the different volumes?
Mm-hmm. You want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So this is obviously an area we're hearing a lot of feedback from customers on right now, is how they'd like to best access that set of data. Today we've been working with J&J on some solutions around getting access to those snapshots and volumes, and then being able to use appropriate keys to control access to those, and then control who's got access and how they get into that. So that's going to be an area where you should stay tuned for future developments, but we definitely are hearing a lot of interest in that from customers.
Yeah, that seems like a core engineering decision you want to make early rather than late.
Yes, agreed.
Second question was around your enterprise apps and enterprise databases. So how do you ensure that you continue to give users a good user experience when you need to reach back into the corporate data center for clinical trial databases, biological data, chemical data that still needs to be brought back to the desktop?
Well, so what's interesting about that, and it seems counterintuitive, but it's actually better, because what happens is, so our direct connects to our integration with Amazon are very low latency, very geographically near integration. So a desktop that's roaming the world, that's VPNing in or over a J&J network link, is at a good distance from the data center where they might be fetching that data from. In this scenario, their desktop's in the data center, highly connected to the apps that they're accessing. So essentially, all that's going to the edge device is pixel stream, right? So most of those scenarios, it's a significant improvement in performance because we're not fetching that data over distances. It's basically in the data center. Your desktop's in the data center. Your application, if it's a multi-tier application, is in the data center. So their local affinity has an advantage there. So the user's just seeing the pixel streaming. We don't allow data locally. So I mean, maybe that's one area I should have clarified. So in a BYOD scenario, or even in a zero client scenario, obviously there's no local storage, but in a BYOD scenario, no data would ever have been local. All the work is done in that J&J virtual desktop, which has local affinity to the rest of the application ecosystem. So, cool.
Hi there. Do you have any DR strategy built around WorkSpaces?
I'm sorry?
Disaster recovery, I think was the question. Is there a DR strategy you guys have?
Yes, I mean, I think we would have to have a business continuity and disaster recovery strategy to go operational. And we did spend some time, going through the details with the WorkSpaces team to ensure that we had a good scenario should we need it, right? So the environment itself is already pretty bulletproof from what we've seen. In scenarios where we do have to restore or recover, we do have a plan in place to make sure that that's possible, even if an availability zone or region goes down. So,
Cool.
Do you have like HIPAA compliant, whether your workspace environment is HIPAA compliant, or what kind of security is there for your workspace environment?
I'm sorry, was it PCI compliant? Was that the
HIPAA.
HIPAA compliant.
So from a HIPAA compliant perspective, when it comes to our physical desktop, so we have some controls in place and requirements to meet for a number of regulatory reasons. So we're considering WorkSpaces a replacement for a standard J&J issued PC. So the same controls are in place, the same compliance requirements are in place. When it comes to really validated or regulated workloads on the desktop device itself, we don't consider them in scope. And it's also a very small percentage of our environment. So we don't validate or We qualify all of our devices, and we qualify this environment in terms of the edge device. I'm sorry, in terms of the workspace environment as well. But if there are any rigid regulatory requirements on that scenario, we're not considering it in scope.
This is a question we get quite a bit on the WorkSpaces front. Obviously, the technologies underlying WorkSpaces, EC2, EBS, these other technologies have a lot of those compliances in place, but we're hearing from customers that they'd like more clarity on the WorkSpaces side, so it's something we're actively looking at.
So,
Sorry.
so do you use the Direct Connect to extend the WorkSpaces networking to your core network that you've been using over time, and that's how you enable centralized management and centralized workflow, or do you find yourself porting more and more of those applications into WorkSpaces as well and running SCCM from another WorkSpace instance, or is it kind of on-prem pushed out to the WorkSpaces?
So that's a good question. I mean, even though we had a very good integration with the VPC environments in our regions, we still saw an advantage of having SCCM, particularly because we've got, we're going to have tens of thousands of client devices in this environment. So we did put core infrastructure in a VPC and peered it to the WorkSpaces VPC. So essentially we've got, when I say core infrastructure, it's things like SCCM, DNS, our Radius integration, as well as Active Directory in the VPC environment peered to the WorkSpaces environment. And that also gives us some confidence that if we, even though we have redundant direct connects, even if we lose connectivity, users are accessing their workspace from the internet. So essentially, they'd still be able to work like they would be able to work, and they might not get to their apps in a J&J data center for a period of time. But so that's how we've done it. So the core infrastructure is alongside, with workspaces in VPC.
All right. Let's get this one over here, and then we'll come over to your side.
I know you're more responsible for end-user computing. Are you also considering moving clients in factories, workflow environments to WorkSpaces?
So that's a very good question. I mean, I think for now, we've considered laboratory manufacturing and warehouse use cases kind of out of scope because they come with a lot more complexity. At some point, I mean, there is a demand there from the business units that run those environments to have this kind of flexibility, but that's not something we've done yet, and that's not something we consider in scope for this year, simply because it was far more complex to address than our standard J&J issued PC would have given us. But the demand is there. We've got business units that are responsible from a laboratory and manufacturing perspective that are really looking. Most of them have very complex, one-off custom Citrix or VMware kind of implementations, and they're getting tired of, and they're N-3 versions behind, and they're getting tired. So I'd see that happening at some point in the future, but it'll be a bigger, it'll be a bigger discussion than just what we had to go through to get our standard J&J desktops into this scenario.
Okay. I think we had a question behind the poll there. We'll come back.
So your client PCs within the office environment, are they going out through your Direct Connect, or are they going out through the internet too?
That's another good question I should have highlighted. So essentially, as Nathan pointed out, so if you're at a J&J office and you're getting to WorkSpaces, it's an internet-facing service. So essentially, we've established a kind of an untrusted wireless BYOD SSID. So all BYOD devices that are at a J&J facility that are getting the WorkSpaces just get on that wireless network, which just gets them to the internet. It's not part of the core. It's not traveling up our Direct Connect. It's essentially just getting them to the internet to get to their workspace. Thin clients are integrating from an authentication perspective. There's some Direct Connect dependency there. But then again, I think the pixel streaming is still done over the internet.
Mm-hmm. So it is the way you guys have it. And I think we had a question here.
In regards to licensing, you said about kind of bring your own licensing. Open licensing works with this, or can you also purchase the licensing? Mm-hmm. Speaking of like Office and Windows and things like that, is there a purchase model within WorkSpaces as well as you can bring your own licenses?
Yeah, so today there's a few different topics there. On WorkSpace's application manager for the applications, you can definitely bring your own licenses for the applications that you want to bring on top of it. That includes Office. You also have a licensed versions of Office in WorkSpace's application manager. and we offer Office as part of the bundles if you want to add it to the bundles. So there's kind of options there. The core operating system license for 2008 R2 is included in the WorkSpaces launch when you launch it. We got time for maybe one or two more. Just why don't you go ahead and we'll just repeat it.
As you went through this process, how do you feel that your IT team changed? It sounds like there's a lot more development that's involved in making a change like this. Typically, an IT team is more break fix or hands-on.
Well, so, I mean, the question was essentially, how did our team change, since this is a little bit different than the traditional physical the skill sets you would require in a physical PC world. I think we had the skill sets in-house to do a lot of what we were doing. And, you know, I'm focused on the end user services as well in the physical world. So it was a very interesting opportunity for some of our existing resources to kind of get some new skills. Most of them were very excited to do so. So we just basically leveraged the talent we had. Many of them had to come up to speed. All of them loved it. So it was really kind of an opportunity to also grow our staff, skill set wise. So change wise, I mean, again, we're probably looking at a lot of the same processes, even though much more automation is there, but for patching, you know, same compliance stuff. So some of the same skills really are between the two environments the same. But to your point, there's a lot more programming involved, a lot more code involved. But we had that skill set. So, I mean, I think it just gave a broader opportunity to other members of the team to kind of get exposed to it. Sure.
Do you feel like your team is more proactive now than reactive regarding issues?
I think so. So whenever we launch a new service, we kind of consider ourselves in hypercare for a period of time until we convinced ourselves that things have settled down. I think I'd say we're definitely trying to be much more proactive. Some of that's probably because we're in this hypercare mode, but a lot of it's also because we're getting very detailed alerts as things happen from, you know, as you heard from the CloudWatch side of things. You know, we're getting much more information in real time than we've had before, right? Since this stuff is now running in the cloud. So I'd see us definitely shifting to a much more proactive model than we are in the physical world, but we're still we're really just coming to full stride now, so that's going to happen over time.
How much time do we have? Do we have time for any more? Do one more? You want to grab this one?
Yeah, so you mentioned patches, that's all standard stuff. How do you update your golden image to roll it out to hundreds of users? You know, in BDI, golden image, roll it out.
Yeah, so I mean, we go through a cycle where when enough patches release, I don't know, we do a monthly. So essentially monthly we do a new image and we upload it and it becomes the new gold image and we patch existing workspaces. So our goal would be to try to keep the number of images we manage to a minimum, you know, the same best practices as in the physical world essentially. And essentially we're following the same processes in the physical world. So whenever we would update our physical image, we will update our virtual image and we will import it into our 3 regions.
Cool. So Jeff and I will be up here after for a little while if you guys have other questions, but thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you, everyone.